The illusion of a state-held Bitcoin reserve, we often mistake the declaration for the deed, don't we? This is the quiet truth we observe when political pronouncements meet the unyielding logic of a decentralized reality. What happens when the oldest institutions attempt to grasp the newest forms of value? We see a fascinating dance between intention and inertia, a story of a proposed strategic Bitcoin reserve that remains, a year later, a mere echo of an idea. We see it, don't we? The grand pronouncements, the celebratory headlines, the initial surge of optimism that often accompanies the political recognition of a nascent truth. A year ago, the notion of a strategic Bitcoin reserve within the federal government was met with a certain enthusiasm from some corners of the crypto world. It was hailed by some as a sign of Bitcoin's maturation, a validation from the very systems it was designed to transcend. But what does it truly mean for a government to declare a reserve of an asset that fundamentally resists central control? This is where the quiet logic of human action begins to unfold, revealing the inherent contradictions in such an endeavor. The initial impulse, we understand, was to acknowledge, to account for the government's existing crypto holdings, to bring a semblance of order to what might have seemed like a chaotic new frontier. Yet, the very act of attempting to formalize a reserve for Bitcoin within the existing bureaucratic framework immediately encountered a fundamental friction. The executive order, a powerful steer from the president, found itself constrained by the very structures it sought to command. It lacked the power of law, the legislative authority required to operationalize such a vision. This is not a failure of will, perhaps, but a revelation of the limits of centralized authority when confronted with a phenomenon that thrives on decentralization. Consider the nature of a strategic reserve. Historically, these are stockpiles of critical resources, oil, precious metals, even food, held by a state to mitigate emergencies, stabilize markets, or project power. They are assets that can be controlled, deployed, and crucially, released into a system by a central authority. But what does a reserve truly mean when the asset itself is a global, permissionless, and inherently scarce digital commodity whose value is derived not from state backing, but from its mathematical integrity and the distributed consensus of millions? The very concept of a strategic Bitcoin reserve implies a state's ability to manipulate its supply or influence its price, much like a central bank might intervene in a fiat currency market. Yet, Bitcoin's design renders such intervention futile. Its supply schedule is fixed, its issuance transparent, and its network resilient to any single point of control. To hold Bitcoin in a reserve is to acknowledge its value, yes, but it is also to implicitly misunderstand its essence. It is to treat a sovereign, self-regulating system as if it were merely another commodity to be managed by political decree. We observe the legislative labyrinth that follows such an executive order, the need for congressional action, the novel legal questions that arise. These are not mere bureaucratic hurdles. They are the friction points where an old paradigm attempts to impose its rules upon a new reality. Lawmakers, like Senator Cynthia Lummis, propose legislation seeking to formalize what the executive branch could only declare. The idea of tucking such a bill into a must-pass funding package, a Christmas tree bill, reveals the political expediency at play. It is a testament to the difficulty of passing legislation on its own merit, especially when it touches upon something as fundamentally disruptive as Bitcoin. This legislative maneuvering, this search for a convenient legislative vehicle, speaks volumes about the political calculus. It suggests that the idea of a Bitcoin reserve, while perhaps appealing to some, lacks the broad bipartisan consensus needed for standalone passage. It becomes an ornament on a larger bill, a testament to its secondary priority, or perhaps its inherent controversy within the traditional political framework. Is it not curious how the very systems designed to control now seek to co-opt what they cannot fully comprehend? And what of the funding? The initial order encouraged creative policies that would allow the government to add to the stockpile without spending taxpayer dollars. This phrase, without spending taxpayer dollars, is a fascinating linguistic construct. It hints at a desire to acquire a valuable asset without incurring the political cost of direct purchase, or perhaps without acknowledging the true economic cost. It suggests a search for loopholes, for indirect means, for anything that avoids the direct, transparent act of buying Bitcoin on the open market. This approach reveals a deeper tension. If Bitcoin is truly a strategic asset, a store of value for the long term, why the reluctance to acquire it directly, transparently, and with conviction? The answer, we deduce, lies in the political discomfort of allocating public funds to an asset that challenges the very monetary system that government controls. It is easier to seize, to confiscate, to acquire through indirect means than to openly endorse and purchase what many within the establishment still view with suspicion. We hear whispers, rumors from market commentators about the timing of such acquisition. Trump's people were poised to start filling the reserve when Bitcoin hit $60,000, one might hear, but these are mere echoes in the market's noise. Without the legislative framework, without the authorized accounts, without the explicit funding, such pronouncements are simply that, pronouncements. They are the market's reflection of human desire, not the quiet certainty of implemented policy. The market, in its wisdom, does not wait for political permission to move. The government's existing holdings, estimated at over 300,000 Bitcoin, totaling more than 20 billion, are often cited. But how were these acquired? Predominantly through seizures related to criminal activity. This is not a strategic purchase. It is a consequence of law enforcement. It is a reactive accumulation, not a proactive investment. This distinction is crucial. It highlights that the government's current reserve is not a testament to its foresight or its belief in Bitcoin as sound money, but rather a byproduct of its role in maintaining order within the existing legal framework. The advisor's reluctance to share leading ideas for obtaining more Bitcoin for a fund meant for long-term appreciation, not technically as a strategic reserve that would imply its contents would be released to mitigate any emergencies, is another telling detail. This subtle distinction between long-term appreciation and strategic reserve is not merely semantic. It reveals a fundamental uncertainty about Bitcoin's role within the state's framework. Is it an investment, a seized asset, a tool for future financial stability, or simply a politically convenient asset to hold without a clear articulated purpose? The silence from the White House on the halt in progress further underlines the ephemeral nature of executive orders. They are powerful signals, certainly, but they are not the immutable force of law. They are a high-level steer, a direction, but one that requires the complex machinery of government to follow through. And when that machinery encounters novel legal questions, or a lack of political will, or simply the inherent resistance of a decentralized asset, the steer can languish, becoming a testament to the limits of centralized power. Senator Lummis's bill, calling for 1 million tokens, about 5% of Bitcoin's total eventual supply, is an ambitious vision. It speaks to a profound understanding of Bitcoin's potential as a foundational asset. Yet its journey through the legislative process, its placement within a committee focused on other digital asset matters, reveals the fragmented and often slow pace of political adaptation. The focus on Digital Asset Market Clarity Act before a Bitcoin Reserve Act suggests a prioritization of regulation and control over direct acquisition and strategic hold. It is the natural inclination of the state to first define and regulate before it can truly embrace or integrate. We are left to ponder the true meaning of a reserve in this new era. Is it a physical vault guarded by the state? Or is it the distributed ledger itself, secured by cryptography and the collective action of millions, held by individuals in their own cold wallets? The former is an attempt to impose an old model onto a new reality. The latter is the reality itself. The question isn't what Bitcoin is worth to a government. The question is what a government is willing to sacrifice in terms of control, in terms of understanding, in terms of adapting its very framework to truly embrace an asset that embodies individual sovereignty. The market, in its ceaseless flow, continues to reveal these truths, regardless of political declarations or legislative delays. Perhaps then, the truest act of foresight is not to wait for a government to secure your future, but to secure it yourself in the quiet certainty of your own cold wallet. We are block sonic. We don't predict the market. We read its memory. Never forget. Bitcoin is only yours in your cold wallet.